Well. Hey, YouTube. How we doing today? We're going to talk about some of my favorite things today, which have to do with society, culture, things going on with men, male trauma, and the whole complicated thing around that, if I can properly say that word. And man, there's actually a Zoom call that we'll be doing after this, which I'm going to cut the YouTube and the TikTok feed from. Thank you all for being here. If you want to be on my free calls where I interact with you, so this one I'm just going to be presenting, guys. I'm probably going to have to say this over and over again, but if you want to be on those free calls, sign up for my email list. It's the first link at the bottom or on my profile on TikTok, and it will take you there. Now, the other thing too is if you're rewatching this, you can always watch it on double speed. If you want notes on it, I would highly advise you, especially if you're a guy going through different things. They get so complicated. We want to start learning to use things like Google Gemini, which came out with an awesome update this week, as well as ChatGPT or Claude. And we want to be able to take the transcripts of this and put it into something that is useful. But I'm going to get started on this sucker because we don't have a lot of time. I don't have a lot of time. I got to get moving. There's a big event I got to go to today. And man, I'm so happy to be doing this. We actually just got done with a call that started to talk about this. So let me reset here. So earlier today earlier this week on our calls, in fact, it was yesterday, we had an issue come up about false allegations. Actually, hold on, I forgot to press record on the other camera. Sorry, guys. Sorry for you live guys out there. We'll get to it. So on Friday, we had one of our calls for custody and what we talk almost every day of the week about high conflict custody and so on. And something got brought up about how do we get back from false allegations and recover as men? How do we recover mentally, socially? If we're going to date again, how could we actually trust people again? And this is something that the reason why they were asking me this is because I've gone through. So from 2005 to 2012, I was falsely accused of almost everything under the sun that you could imagine. And there weren't really any resources for men back then to look at different things. But at the same time, I was traveling around the world. I was an international speaker, talking at all sorts of different events for men. And it was something where I started to connect the dots with a lot of the different things in my life. So my work as a men's coach, talking to men about social dynamics and a lot of different frowned upon things. My work in recovery. So being somebody that's been in recovery since I was 14. And at the time, I guess I was 34 when stuff really started to go bad. I was already, 4 years clean or something like that. And then this new work of false allegations, of having your life ruined, being seen as a villain, being seen as an evil person when these things never really were a reality towards you. And this is one of those things where as soon as, in relevance to our Friday's call, when we're in a custody battle and we have false allegations, right, that we were abusive to our kids. And first that starts out with our family. Our family starts to take sides, people we trusted. Then let's say CPS or the police get involved and it becomes a criminal matter like mine. And you're seen as a criminal. You're seen as somebody who is evil. You're seen and treated that way by the system. You enter into the courts, which you don't understand. And everything is just going crazy with the courts. You're inundated by all of that. And then law enforcement, maybe you get arrested. And when this happens, you move all because of a lie, all because of gossip, all because there was an ecosystem that was able to hear this. You become one of the most toxic people in society. And really think about this. Right now, as we're going through this, we have all this stuff with the Epstein files being released, all these things about how bad it would be to be an abusive, toxic human being in this world. And you're in that boat. Whether you're seen as a physically abusive child abuser, sexually abusive child abuser, when we get into false allegations, it's usually anything that anybody will listen to us with. And as we know over and over again, this is easier to do than we think. It's easy to make up a lie about a parent and win favor immediately in court. So it's quicker to have an allegation of false abuse claims set fire in the courtrooms, basically take away your parenting, than almost any other argument. It becomes an emergency. Everybody reacts to it. And if the person's a narcissist or something like that, they get immediate attention. And so all of a sudden, people have this feeling where nobody will listen to them. And man, nobody will listen to them. It's really a terrible thing. And when we go through that, I think one of the reasons why I think it's important to talk about my history and things is that at the time I was going through this, it was something that really helped me that I didn't realize could help me. First, there was my support system. So at the time in recovery, I went through a 12-step support system, and it was really good. It totally saved my life in so many ways. It doesn't necessarily have to be your thing or whatever, but it showed me that community was there. It showed me that things were possible. And then also, there was my work with men. So I saw these connecting of dots of every single male problems, right? And this may not be relevant to you, and we'll get to a little bit more of the solution to this, but with men and women, I know there's a lot of women listening on TikTok and that sort of thing, but with men and women, we have major problems in our culture that are consistent, and we have false solutions given to them. So it's always like, be better, be cooler, be more of society. And then all of a sudden, when you're kind of that guy, like let's say you're going through a false accusations divorce thing, you're kind of that guy. And then all of a sudden, everything you worked for that was supposed to have meaning, that was guaranteed, that would give you respect, that was supposed to make you happy, was supposed to make your family work. Even your bond with your children is taken away. Okay. And none of those things exist. And so where I got my answer from, especially being in recovery communities, basically, if you have a problem with drugs, you probably are on maybe not, whatever, but you might be on the lower rungs of society. So those are some of the people I saw. It's not everybody. I don't want to say it is a broad thing, but you get how common it is. And so I knew all these people that were the forgotten vets with PTSD, men who were forgotten, women who were sex workers, women who were forgotten. There were people that had custody issues, women that had custody issues, they were forgotten. All these people that were abused and tried to tell their school therapist or whatever, forgotten. All the people thrown away in society, somehow, not all of them, but some of them became people with drug and alcohol problems that I formed a lot of my rebuilding from. Okay, and I know that's not everybody, and you can be, there's all sorts of variance in this, but somehow, I just watched the Waves of War thing, and it said, there's this little line they snuck in there, and there's a lot of commentary I have about that because I think it's good, but it gives somewhat of a false narrative about plant medicine and so on. But they say, there's this little line that they just sneak in, and it says, it makes you think, something like this, it makes you think, if there was no abuse, could we even have an army? And this is something that we see a lot with addiction. There's oftentimes some form of abuse. And again, another thing which has a lot of false things in it. So here we are as functioning people, and then all of a sudden, our life is rocked. We're seen as criminals. We're seen as nothing. Our families hate us. This is what happened to me. My parents turned on me. Actually, and they turned on me before this, and the actual jail time of me being put in jail brought them back to realize that maybe somebody was lying and set out to destroy my life. And we have our friends turn on us. I lost business relationships for years, and probably still, people will say, like when I was speaking to those conventions and so on, there were multiple people that said, man, Steve Myatt is a monster. How could you support him? It was one of my good friends who worked at one of those conventions, and he said, man, I'm sorry to say this, but this is what they think of you. He didn't tell me that until years later. And I said, what? That's the reason why they wouldn't let me come to their talks? All fake. So we look at this, and if you're a man or a woman going through false allegations, I'm going to tell you this, right? Everybody tells you about the high road. Everybody tells you about forgiveness, but nobody's asking people who actually went through that. Okay, and so I've gone through that, and I don't want to say I have the definitive answer, but I have more of an answer than most people that are giving you. And I think it's okay to distance yourself from those people. Forgiveness is yours. It doesn't need to be theirs. And if, I don't have those people in my life. I can be nice to them on the surface some of the times, or some of the times I don't want to see them. And forgive and forget is too simplified in this. I just don't do that. And to be honest, I take all of those spiritual things very seriously, dedicated my life to it in a lot of ways. But I don't think that it gives you any value in your court case in how to rebuild your life, how to fix the things that allowed you to attract people like this in your life and all that sort of stuff. I don't think it helps any of those roads to quickly forgive and follow somebody's advice blindly on these things. I also, that doesn't mean that I hate these people. And we're going to get into a lot of touchy subjects here that are left alone, just like all the forgotten people, just like the sex worker friends of mine that were my only friends, just like the drug addict friends of mine that were my only friends, just like the underbelly of our culture that was thrown away seeking an answer to try and get better were my only friends and all that I could look to when I was like, how do I recover from this extreme pain? Okay. And that's sad. That's sad that what our culture sees is readily available, is politically correct, as something that is easy to find. You can just search for it, is there. Because what I'm actually going to talk about today is stuff that I've been making about videos for. I made a video, I gave a speech in 2014 that's called The Myth of the Alpha Male. Try and find it. Buried, because nobody gives a shit about it, right? And it's not just that nobody cares about it, but it's actually bringing up the same points, or a lot of the same points that we're going to go over today. So when a man's in this, right, a man becomes desperate. A man or woman. Thank you, TikTok. When they're going through false allegations, they're desperate. They've had their identity as a father taken away. They've had their identity as a man taken away. They have all the things that they counted on taken away and turned against them. And those friends that stay in the middle and say, I don't want to get involved, but they do. You know, they don't take a side, but they're overly cautious and basically don't talk to you. And the only thing they say to you is, well, if you really did it, you can tell me, right? You're alone. And when you're alone and you're desperate and you're looking for masculinity, you buy the low hanging fruit of what masculinity says it is. And so a man that enters into, why should I trust anybody? Why should I forgive anybody? You know, goodness never got me anywhere. And I want to be this remaking of things. And you can readily see how feminism or women's rights may be tied to this. And again, if you know my stuff, I don't hate those things. But you start to see this. You start to look at these different people online that look like the superheroes of what's going to get your masculinity back. And this could be the red pill, whatever in the manosphere. This could be following Andrew Tate and so on. This could be following all these different people that tell you why you have this problem, because you were weak, because you cared, because you didn't learn how to balance things right. And we're going to look at some Greek philosophy to show you what real warriors did. And we're going to do that. And what's interesting about this entire industry, because I was a part of it before that industry came about, and I left doing that because it disgusted me so much, was that they actually don't have experience in this. Right? This is actually where Andrew Tate is a little bit different. You know, we'll come back to that, but in some ways he is the real deal, but you'll never be it. And you probably don't want to be. But most of those people giving advice don't have the experience. They don't have the experience with women, with relationships, with understanding people, with looking at the full arc of things. And then they denounce people by saying like, oh, it's a black and white thing. So if you agree that there's problems with this, you support, you know, the white side or the black side. You support feminism. You support this. You're a beta. You're a purple pill alpha. That's what they would call me, because I got both sides. I wasn't just red pill or blue pill. I was a purple pill alpha. There we go. Okay. So we come up with these things not to listen. And then when we go to politically correct culture and we go, no, wait a minute. There is a problem with the narrative that men get. You know, and let's go to this thing with false allegations. This is something I know very, very well. Okay. And this is something that a lot of the manosphere guys, the red pill guys, sadly don't get. I really know what it's like to say, man, I'm being abused by the system and I want help. And when I went to the therapeutic alternatives, like the PC alternatives, when I went to them, they said they did a couple things right away. They compared my pain with female pain. Okay. They minimized it and diminished it and said, it's not that bad. Okay, and I'll give you an example. So in my custody case, this is actually a, should I share this? Should I share this? We'll share another thing. Like, let's say in drug addict culture, let's say I'm manipulated as a drug addict into sex. Let's say I'm tricked into that. Okay, I'm forced into it through coercion, through you can't have this, and then blackmailed and humiliated for it. Let's actually take an example of modern day problems. Somebody goes on a sex webcam site and they're recorded, or they're told to turn on their camera, they're recorded and they're blackmailed for it. Okay, when a man brings that up, if you go to a support group for that, the typical thing is going to be, is it worthy of it? And then you go, well, I guess you're right, it's not worthy. Like, I didn't want to talk about it anyway. And so when we get into false allegations, the same thing happens. I go, man, I need help with this, and um, this is effed up. I go to the courts, and they go, man, women do this all the time. Women got their kids taken away. It's the first thing you hear, and you go, you know what, you're right. I'm going to tough it out. And then we hear that toxic masculinity is holding it in because people told you to man up. But the very culture, and again, I'm not trying to say anything about liberal or conservative here, but the more liberal left-leaning side of the culture that's saying men need to heal, which I really care about a lot, tells me it's not good enough. And I need to consider other people's pain first before I bring mine up. So my feelings, my real feelings of attempting to talk about this are shut up. I feel bad because I'm devalued. I feel bad because I can't see my kids. I feel bad because I don't know what to do. I can't fucking think. I can't do simple math. I can't turn on my phone and go to work because my kids are taken away and I miss them and I want to see them, and I'm being told I'm a child abuser. And everybody believes it. Now I don't know if I am or not. And all people can tell me are, well, are you really? Did you really do it? And you're being over dramatic and you should move on and you should find a hobby. This is what's told. Now, this is also what's told to women in a different way, but men kind of get a double whammy. It's bad all the way around, okay? Just men and women have unique issues with it. And so when we're left to that alone, what options do we have? And I, who have on paper, I mean, you can look it up, you might find a lot of weird stuff, but have served real answers that have to work. You come to me for custody, it has to work. There's no guarantees here, but the end goal is that you get custody of your kids. You defend false allegations. That's my goal, right? When it comes to social dynamics, that it has to express your real self and connect you with other people. It has to get you that. It has to get you fulfillment of your nature, right? It has to work. When you come to me with PTSD, you have to be able to sleep at night. You have to be able to build relationships with your kids. You have to solve it. I'm not looking for a surface level of any of it. For 20 years, this is my track record. So when I make different speeches, like I brought up the myth of the alpha male speech, which I think is in 2014, and it's talking about this very thing, but everybody else wants to listen to the dude who takes steroids or fits, wears the mask, wears the costume of men's development. What do we get? And women have the same thing too. Who do you follow? You want to have worth in our culture, you got to be anorexic, have plastic surgery, and have a social media following that says you're a boss babe. You can't be yourself because you're sold something else. So what this exposes in here is when we have all of these false allegations hitting us, is we have to go back to the core of what we are. And what we are is amazing, right? And I just want to say this now, you're probably in a lot of pain. And here's one of the things I love about custody and support for that. You want to get custody of your kids? I have ways. They're really hard. They're very, very hard. But if you have that fight, I can show you where to go and what to do. And a lot of them are for free, right? You only pay for my services with my groups. If you want some other things, and I say, like, let's say, like our culture gets so distorted by this, you want to find love and connection. You want to beat PTSD. You want to get back from depression. And I say, but it doesn't matter about the fancy car or the cool stuff or the house or the social media following. What it matters about is this internal stuff and then getting the result that fulfills you. People are so warped and jaded in our culture that they say they can't listen. Okay. The cool thing about custody, which is not so cool, is there's so much pain. You just want your kids. You'll be happy with that. You'll be happy with that. And if I can show you that, we can go down to what your real true value is. And then it can start to work in every other part of your life, which is the good part about it. Okay. And this is what I learned, when it's like I hit my bottom, I was in recovery. I was working with a lot of people. I did a ton of service work, and all those things taught me so much. So if we follow our cultural healing process to this, right? So we can't trust women. We can't trust people. We have to make sure and have power. What is the whole thing of the rational male, right? There's actually a great book by this guy named Rollo May that's called Man's Search for Himself. And I always say, what's that book, Man's Search for? It's by Rollo. And they're like, Rollo Tabasi, Man's Search for Meaning. And anyway, whatever. But it's really good. You should read it. It actually breaks what I'm talking about down. You should totally listen to Rollo May. Awesome. Watch some videos by him. Amazing person, existential philosopher, just an amazing, amazing mind. Was around in the 70s, wrote amazing books, but Man's Search for Himself is a good one. But when we have a culture, and he talks about this, when we have a culture that doesn't value you, and you have to go and seek it out, and we're starved for identity to be a man. In the reaction, our cultural narrative of what a man is, to have money and power and be cool and all this sort of stuff. And when we do that, and it doesn't work, we're left with this crazy idea, right? I'm so thankful. Like, I had all the problems in my life at 14 to where I couldn't believe in this. Like, I could no longer believe in this, and that there was something more. So when we go through that pain, and then we have the manosphere come in, or women's plastic surgery come in, and immediately sell to broken, desperate, starved people to fix their problems, everybody buys it. And really think about this. How did we get starved with our identity as a man? How did we get starved with our identity as a woman? How did we get starved with our identity of our sexual worth? And if you're a man, you can't talk about sex. You talk about sex, you're bad. Like, if I were to talk about my thoughts and desires, it would have to be put through this PC filter. And so then we buy these bullshit ideas, right? And we're convinced they'll work. That we join the cult of, like, we're going to latch onto this. We're going to believe in this guy, Andrew Tate. We're going to make, so-and-so a superhero of our journey. We're going to believe that we could be, the rebuilt person, and then we're going to have value in that. We take everything human and we put it into a sociopathic mindset. We put it in a mindset of objectivity, of value, of social value. And you might be saying, well, Steve, but we can prove, because I watched 500,000 hours of, whatever manosphere stuff, and that value does matter. Okay. And it may to some degree, but it's not the human experience. But we heard this evolutionary psychologist, biologist talk about, how women wear these things and men do this, and it means that. Think about this. Our society's become so desperate that we reach for clowns to teach us. In the men's movement, way back when, there was actually a men's movement in the 80s and 90s that was kind of cool, but it didn't fully manifest. But when I came in 2005 and 2006, there was this guy Mystery, and there was Owen Cook, my good friend Tyler Durden, that gave this advice on meeting women. And this is where I worked in. And people who were federal judges, people who were important, powerful men who had all the resources to therapy and good information and intelligence, were willing to believe in a clown. And Mystery, a good person. Some of the people around him, maybe not. A good person, but he was a performer. You believed in a clown instead of anything else. We take Andrew Tate, who's a 3-time world champion, very decorated person, but his persona that we like is a performer. And the other thing about Tate, which is interesting, and about Mystery, is they really do what they say. But why would you ever want to do that? Why would you want to, in Tate's example, like, do you want to run a webcam studio or whatever it was, and have all move to another country and potentially have all sorts of underage people performing internationally illegal things? Like, do you have that in you to do that? Is this your answer for what you're looking for? And so male desperation looks at these false heroes that never have to prove themselves, never have to produce anything that works because they can win the online argument of what is there. And man, I will tell you, 20 years later and seeing this, and even with the red pill when it really kicked off in 2016, what has it solved? What has it given anybody? And when I used to be critical of it, you'd get like death threats, literally, you know, the purple pill alpha. And people would hate you for it. You were taking away you told them Santa Claus wasn't real. Man, it's not real. So we look at all these different influencers. David Goggins, great in so many ways. But he's trying to answer the solutions for a complete culture that has a broken identity in masculinity. Jocko, same thing. Great, decorated, all these great ways. But in order to get the message out there, to broadcast to the real pain, we don't want to listen to the real solution of that. We want to listen to what sounds good. And it moves into selfishness, money, sex, power over people, never being weak. Emotions are not good. When we move into the PC solution of this, the authentic man, this idea of there's a way and a formula to be authentic, but not be yourself, right? So what you have to be yourself is to perform it, to look like a hippie, to act like a hippie, to say these things. I always think it's very interesting when a man tells me he studies, some brand of authenticity through whatever coach because it's a good algorithm word. And he's like, man, and I was afraid of this, but I thought, what does an authentic man do? And I go, he would just say he's afraid. That he would be him and know how to do that. Like, yes, no, he would confidently articulate these things so it could be heard in the right way. It's like some narrative that he doesn't know, that's never been proven, that doesn't need any proof for him to follow. So the more that we have all of this, it creates a bigger problem. Now, I want you to think about this. So way back when, there's videos of me, well, it really doesn't matter, but you can look it up if you want. But I always said that men's self-help, men's improvement hurts men more than anybody else. So when it came out to dating stuff, there was always seen as it was misogynistic. Why in 2005 and 6 did everybody make Neil Strauss and mystery, their kings and gods? Why? Well, because of the misogyny. Okay, that's the answer for it. It couldn't be because these men sought for help, weren't listened to, turned down, their pain was diminished, they were turned away in all these different ways. So they sought something that seemed like it worked, right? And they were being lied to. And so through all of that time, people said, this is how much our culture has so much hatred, toxic masculinity, so much misogyny. And I always was thinking, I work in this industry. I see the real results. All these people who are following Andrew Tate are not becoming pimps and abusing women and trafficking them or whatever it is people claim that he's doing. Nobody's doing that. I actually think, like most people are teaching these sorts of things, aren't doing that. They're making it up and lying so they can sell to the desperate culture of man. I actually think he probably is doing it, and you wouldn't want to be him, right? And if he's doing something illegal or wrong, he should answer for it. But why is this happening, right? And most of our culture takes this narrative of these people are harming women. And they very well may be. Again, it's not an either or. But the vast majority of people that they're harming, the people who follow Andrew Tate or people who follow, the different male idols and heroes, those are the people being harmed because they're given an answer that doesn't work, that creates a new problem. This is what we call the false solution. So it's like, how do I date after false allegations? How do I make friends after false allegations? How do I deal with the pain of it? And we're told over and over again by people that never went through it, get strong, move on, make money, be badass. But if you hold that hate in you, you will repeat it. That is what's going to happen. And the hate is real. And if you're going through this, you probably have it. And to be honest, it's probably justified in some way. I'm not saying that you need to act on it. It's something that is there, very real in front of you. So it's one of these things where when we go through these problems, there's very little guidance. We are given two roads as men, and those two roads don't solve anything. Same thing for women. We're given two roads that are highly superficial, that are the low-hanging fruit of our culture, and we seek it. And then all of a sudden we're given this whole idea of what is masculinity. And there are men who are wearing masks of masculinity, talking about what it's like to be a man. And there are men who are saying they can solve very real, consistent problems. The very, like, what does the red pill say? Depression, lack of sexual partners, custody, divorce court, PTSD, war, less lifespans, overwork, lack of value in the culture. I forget them all, but the ones I remember are all ones that I deal with every single day. And I've worked with men for 20 years on. I've worked with them tirelessly on that. And I don't see any of those guys helping on it. If anything, there's some dating advice, but it's always be superficial. There's nobody taking them through these problems. There's somebody who offers a solution that needs to work for 6 months, if that, and then we're good. And there's really nothing beyond that. Like if you look at it, so it's really, really tough. So with me in working through this, one of the big things that comes from my community, when we look at why do we distrust, what happens when we're screwed over, how do we forgive, it starts with the root of that we were born to do certain things. And this moves into kind of the anthem that I've carried for almost 20 years now, is we were born to be social. What does that mean? Right? We were born to care. We were born to have empathy. And so one of the things that is studied and worked massively in this, and I think we need it for overall mental health, it's not going to solve everything, but if we don't have it, it's going to create scarcity and starvation. Scarcity and starvation always move towards, in a society at least, they're going to move to judgment, boundaries, control, authoritarianism, all these different things that I would assume you don't like. But we have to understand that empathy is one of those root things. So another root thing is if we feed our bodies right, it defaults to health. Doesn't mean it can't be unhealthy. It doesn't mean deformations can't happen. But if we feed it improperly, it's going to become unhealthy. At some point, it will be. And these are like the ideas with like the paleo stuff or these different evolutionary diets of that. If we do that, right, our body defaults to something good. Well, the same thing with our socializing. You know, our bodies also were meant to connect. Our brains, everything is social about it, right? We were meant to have sex. We were meant to have purpose. We were meant to have ambition. Some of the things we weren't meant to do was we weren't meant to read. We weren't meant to be good on camera. We weren't meant to drive. These are all things we can do, but there's a distinction. What is our nature and what is not? You know, things like power, things like control, things like these types of orders. These are our nature mixed with culture. Okay, we could go on and on about this, and I actually love talking about it too much. But when we get to the solution of our pain, of distrust, of being betrayed, how do we make new friends? How do we go through with being seen as a villain? We have to learn to connect again. And we have to learn to connect again with our real selves. And so let's talk about that. Because if we're starting it from a point of many points of male pain in this, oftentimes false allegations, what is the worth to ourselves? We've lost everything. Our worth is supposed to be, you know, the cool stuff that Instagram and TikTok and YouTube and all these things care about. But our worth needs to move towards who we are. So how do we express that? Okay. So I want to talk, before we get into how do we do these things, we need to understand the worth of empathy. All right. In my groups, what makes them so important, this is why I encourage people to have groups, right? So build your own groups. Nobody did this. When I went through my stuff, like I said, 2005 to 2012, I was in and out of recovery, and then in recovery solid at some point in there. But I was in support groups. I could talk about this stuff. Why does it hurt so bad? Why does it make me think I should have money, sex, power to get my way, to have power over women so I never get hurt again? Why do I think that? Because I couldn't connect. Because I didn't have groups where I told people this is the real problem going on. This didn't happen and nobody would listen. It was shut off. And then the answer is like, how do I take and get power? How do I get that? Right. So when we don't have that empathy, when we're starved of it, we look for it. And we're told also in our culture, my empathy, my sharing isn't important unless I have value, like the value of a thing that society cares about. Well, I've been a leader. This is what I should say. Yeah, like I have to try and say this for marketing. I hate it because the guys in my group I care about. I have relationships with them, and I try my best to keep track of them. But one of the things that I'm supposed to say is like, for 20 years I've led men consistently to find, whatever awesomeness in this and that. These things have happened, but you know what I really did in 20? The story I would much rather tell you about is I listened to a man's problems, and it just so happens that not too other many people did, and you got about a lot of false solutions and was sold a false narrative by politically correct culture and by manosphere culture and society in general. And I listened and I said, okay, man, here's what you do. You start here. And he didn't want to listen. And I'd say, no, man, well, maybe until you're in enough pain, you can do that. I would much rather tell that story because you know why? Not because you care about that story or it's popular, but because that was a part of something so magical. Where I've seen over and over again a man who was told he's nothing and should give up and die. And most people would hoped he gave up and died. And he didn't. And he became something that was so worthwhile himself that he could build something and make it for the world. So much that it didn't matter what you thought about it. It mattered what he could show and express to you. Right? This is so important. But again, people don't care about that. Right? And so this is part of that. Now, I'm going to jump to my story a little bit here. So at the time, 2005 to 2012, mainly I'd say 2008 to 2012, there were always false allegations, but from 2008 to 2012, I had tons of false allegations that I had, sexually assaulted my kids, that I'd beat my kids, that I beat my ex, that I beat everybody in her family or something like that, or that I was raping people. There were flyers made that were posted all over Dallas and Fort Worth, Texas, saying my name, Steve Maeda, is a rapist. We can't prove who did them, but we can kind of guess who was relentless about these claims. I had, my car vandalized, my friend's cars vandalized, attacked online and social media. Social media was different then, right? And people called, and said that Steve Maeda is a sex offender, rapist, all these things before I ever was, right? Before I was charged with child abuse, injury to a child. And when that happened, somehow the newspapers were notified by somebody who wrote a very small article, I don't know why, about this whole thing. And it was sent everywhere, sent to my clients, sent to other people I had business relationships with. And, and also my parents. And this is a crappy thing, man. Let me tell you what it's like having, I don't know what I had, 6 months sober. So this was like 17 years ago. 6 months sober and showing up to drop off Christmas gifts at my kid's house. And I didn't know my parents were there. My parents stopped talking to me. And then they didn't know what to do. They didn't know how to talk to me. Drop the gifts off. And back then, I forget what it was, if it was like a phone or not, but phones didn't have messages that you could get images on. I didn't get to see my kids, didn't get to see my dog. I think many people can relate with this. I was told to get away. This is before any protective orders. And I got some sort of notification that was a picture. And it was the gifts that I had given my kids set on fire, saying that your kids and parents want you to kill yourself. And I sent it to my parents, like angry, because I should be angry, right? I should be angry that this is happening. There's no reason why I shouldn't be able to see my kids. And this is what I get. And when I send it and I'm angry, people say, stop, you're angry. You are what they say you are, right? So I'm stuck in this thing. And thank God, I'm early in recovery, although I'd been for a long time, but it's early in this round that's lasted for a while. And I was able to go to meetings and I called somebody. Actually, I called my friend Kevin, you know who you are. But and I told him, I said, man, I can't believe this happened. What do I do? What do I do? What do I do? What do I do, man? And from this, as soon as those things went to criminal allegations, when finally a claim was made after many that the police got involved and arrested me for, it was everywhere. How do you recover from that? And the idea is that you're supposed to quit and give up. And again, you go to the men's rights stuff. Back then, men's rights just sucked. It was like a bunch of whiny guys that clearly did not have an answer. And I was like, man, screw this. I'm going to go back to the 12-step group and like form my own thing. And I already had my own community too. And I could go to therapists, which I did, right? You're supposed to go to therapists, right? You should go to therapy. I believe in therapy. Therapists are in my group. I'm a big fan of it. Therapy can help. But many therapists are not trained with men's stuff. And the first thing you hear is a man or even a woman going through false allegation stuff is like, well, you shouldn't be angry or, all this sort of stuff. No, you can be angry. You have to chill out while talking to me. But I want to help you put that shit somewhere where you need to put it. I don't want you to be angry and hurt anybody. I don't want you to be angry and hurt yourself. But you lost your kids. You can be angry, right? And you should work with good therapists who don't belittle you, diminish you, or make sure you fit their checklist of what a healthy male is supposed to look like in this. It's a disturbing thing, right? So thankfully, I don't know why, right? So much of the manosphere stuff, like if you do the checklist, I've gone through some hard stuff, man. Hard shit. People have gone through harder, much harder. I hate comparing it, but everybody always compares. Well, look at this guy's a Navy SEAL. Okay. All right. I guess we should all listen to him then on how to recover from custody battle stuff. Like, there's very hard things that I've gone through. Okay. Losing my kids, socially alienated, all sorts of addiction stuff. Bad stuff happens in addiction. Bad stuff happens on the street. Bad stuff happens when you're going to get drugs. Bad stuff happens if you're involved in questionable things in addiction. When you have PTSD, when you've suffered from whatever abuse, there's things that happen. Okay. I didn't have these things happen in my life so I could say I'm cool or tough. These things happened probably due to some poor choices and some events that happened. Having your first girlfriend kidnapped and tortured and seeing that happen, that's a hard thing at 18 years old. These are things that they suck, right? Okay, they suck. All of these things, in order for you to make through it and be a functional human being, a lot of it I don't get. It wasn't mental toughness. It wasn't badassery. It wasn't a lot of the stuff which people are saying happened. And I will even tell you this. I don't know anybody that has dealt with false accusations and having their kids taken away that has that work for them. I would also argue, although there's other examples of people who go through kidnappings and torture, people who go through long periods of time of repeated sexual assault, of people who go through long periods of time of addiction, people who are a guy that has problems and they seek out help and the doors are shut on them because you want to be careful first that you're not toxic first, and that in your problems compared with women's problems and diminished first before we can even hear your problems. I don't know many people that have gone through that where the whole being a badass thing works. Being a badass is great. Like, being a badass is awesome. I think I get that enough. But what actually helped me in this was having faith in people again. And then we go to this kind of PC spiritual side of like, well, forgiveness, peace, meditation, whatever it is. Like there's many of these things that I take very, very seriously. And I do them personally. I don't do them to brag about or advertise. In fact, most of you guys don't know about them. Like most of the people in my groups don't know about them, right? But there's a huge part of my life that is dedicated to this. And in all of that, most of the people commenting on how to forgive, be spiritual, walk the high road, be a good parent afterwards, to understand that your pain has worth, that that suffering can equate to insight or enlightenment, have actually never done that. They've listened to some Alan Watts and read some Eckhart Tolle books or whatever it is, but they've never done that. So people would say, like, you have unresolved anger because of this and that, or your men's group. This is my favorite, right? You have this group of men and they talk about all this, like, get over it. You're reliving your trauma. This is like really what is said to me. You realize how little men's groups are out there. You realize how underserved this is. Men or women, your pain that nobody gives a shit about is then told it's obsessing about trauma, reliving it, or any of these different things. Again, I got lucky. I've done tough stuff. Great. And that has a value to it. I'm not diminishing it. I actually hate that about politically correct culture that says toxic masculinity is related to like competition and fighting. And there is a value to these things. Man, I love it. I love it. So proud of it. Right? But how did I make it out functional? Because I know so many people that aren't. Man, there was a lot of grace, a lot of luck. Why did my truly badass friend Matt, truly badass, why did he die and I didn't? Why? How did addiction kill him but not me? How did abuse and hyperviolence happening in his early life kill him and not me? I don't know. And within that, the one thing that we all went for, right, was how do we connect? How do I listen? How do I share? And this is where it ties into this, right? So let's set aside my groups. Let's set aside this road. Let's set aside how the fuck do you rebuild your life when you have been sabotaged and ruined? What did I do in those times? What did I do in those times from 2008 to 2012 when, man, I was drugged through the mud? And this was all the time when I was building up my coaching business. And I said, you're born to be social. You're born to connect. Share your real story. Learn how to share that. And then they say that now it would be called trauma dumping or using vulnerability to manipulate people, or you're reliving your trauma, or you're trying to find a solution in tricking people, all these different things. Man, don't get me wrong. I had no guidance. I had nothing showing me. There's some of that probably was there, but it wasn't all there. And it isn't what survived in my groups. And it isn't what manifested from the beginning in my groups. It was to go up and talk to people and to start new conversations and learn how this worked. Learn an actual social dynamic that isn't like money, sex, power, or, buying drugs to get people to like you, or having pseudo famous stuff to get people to like you. It was about, what is the quickest way to get a connection with somebody? How can I share the real me? And it's not valuable unless the real them can come out and talk to me, because usually it's a bunch of superficial stuff. Like, what are you passionate about? Man, I'm passionate about life, work. I'm really into this. No, there's so much more, because we don't know how to talk to people. You know why? Because everybody in this culture is starved from their nature. Everybody. How do we be a man? How do we be a woman? We're all starved and we're desperate for it. And so we want to learn to do that. Okay. And part of that is understanding who you are. So I'm going to finish this up and get to my groups. Tuesday night, 9:30 p.m. If you're on my email list, we have a free call where you can come on and interact with me on Zoom and we talk and all that sort of stuff. And I answer whatever questions you have on whatever it is. But usually that's custody related stuff on the channels that I'm broadcasting now. You can get on my email list for that. It's free. It's free community. You go to the profile on TikTok or on YouTube, the link down below. But I want you to know this, that your value of sex is valuable. What makes you a man? What makes you a woman? That is your sex. Makes you valuable. Right? It's super important to you to be able to express that and reciprocate it. Your value of who you are and your identity. That's the empathy. Super important. It has value. And our culture lies to you about all those things. You could only talk about sex if it's an advertisement, if it's like a politically correct narrative. You can't even talk about what it's like to be a man or a woman without defaulting to these superficial ideas of what it is. And everybody wants to tell you what it is. To be social, we're supposed to hit the social marketplace value in order to have worth. Man, I'll tell you something. If you've ever watched your child be born, what a beautiful thing. What an amazing thing. If I tell you about that, it's not the same as being there. And the same thing goes for standing in front of somebody and sharing your story. So one of the things that we were talking about on the call before this was, how do we do that? How do we get started with social dynamics? That was the call. Like, it's 3:22 from noon to about 2. We are having a call about that. I'm going to end this live stream, and then we're going to have a call with our paid groups of how do we do this for people that are going through a place where we have no friends, high conflict custody, a place where everybody's turned their backs on us, a place where everybody hates us. We're told that we are the abusive man. How do we do that? In any case, guys, I think it's a very important thing. If you want to hear more about these things, about the ideas of men's pain, our cultural pains, and how right now they're manifesting in terms of divorce and custody for you, and kind of like all the different diversity of what I teach, let me know in the comments. Let me know in whatever you see, because I love talking about them. And man, it is my goal for the next 5 years to tie these together in all the stuff that I've done, to not just talk about custody, not just talk about men's issues with male loneliness and pain, but to show how they are all together. And there is a cultural component, but it's not just what we've been told and how very wrong those things are. Build strength, guys. Be good. Peace out to you all. Stay strong, stay alive till Tuesday night, and we talk. YouTube, thanks for watching. Never trust afterwards. Yeah, man. Always keep in mind, women will flip in a hot minute. And this is one of those things, because we need to understand that if we only keep it that narrative, right? That's true. That's true. Man, men act this way, women act this way. Boom. But we have to be able to have that conversation. So this is kind of like a similar thing. Like, we have to have that conversation. I had to talk to people who were in the forgotten, thrown away part of society to get an answer. And man, when you start there, you see some interesting stuff, because you have pimps, you have people that are prostitutes trying to better their lives and come with the answers that come from that crazy Rubik's Cube of how things work. But when I went to the good side of culture, that basically said, like, man, we have the happy face and all the happy people and all that sort of stuff. Man, I got nothing. Like, that's an interesting thing. Like, I'm so grateful for recovery in that sense, because when I went to the culture that was supposed to have the answer to help me, all I got back was diminishing dismissals. And there was help too, but like, you really had to look through. You had to be like abused again in order to get to find somebody that was good, like some form of therapy. But I got a lot more out of the strippers, the prostitutes, the drug addicts, all these people that were going to the different 12-step stuff I was going to, the vets, and we had to find an answer that nobody gave a shit about. All right. I'm going to go on YouTube, guys. If you're on the Zoom, get on the Zoom. I'm going to open up the Zoom call. If you're in the paid groups and all that sort of stuff, and we'll start there. But yeah, man, I think there's definitely a value of definitely of we have to have that guy talk, that barbershop talk. There's a value to it. It's not all toxic. Of like, man, women don't make anything up. They'll do this and that, but we can't stay there. It's got to move back to connection. We have to realize that we have to complete ourselves with everybody, not in some stupid hippie way, in like a functioning way that's good for what I would call real male power. All right. On that note, guys, thank you so much. I appreciate you. We'll see you again soon.